Welcome back. This is part 2 of the problem-based learning module. On the previous recording, we covered the what and why of problem-based learnings and the potential formats. On this video, we will address leading a discussion and troubleshooting. Because the goals are to encourage students in their decision-making and application of knowledge, in an ideal discussion, the students will do most of the talking. The basic roles of the facilitator are to present the facts of the case and move through it in a timely manner, to keep the discussion on track. As students respond to the case, occasionally they may be sidetracked by a concept that's not relevant to the teaching point or objectives, and the facilitator can steer the discussion back to the case. Enabling whole group participation can be challenging, as some students are naturally more outspoken than others, or maybe more prepared than others. Ultimately, the facilitator is a guide, and at the end of the session, students should have a clear idea of the correct approach to the case, which is even more important than memorizing a set of medical facts. Using information from the case discussion and their own experience, facilitators make sure that the correct course of action and application of knowledge is clear to the participants. Sometimes, a facilitator does not get through the entire case, which is okay, as long as the objectives are met. Now, as facilitators, you should have the answers, maybe except for some controversial issues, but you should not be the sole source of information for the students. That is, just because you have the answers doesn't mean that you should give all the answers to the students. Now, occasionally, the case may need to be modified slightly to be more applicable to the experience of the students. And this should be done ahead of time so that you can maximize the learning experience during the case. And some concepts may be particularly challenging for students. Some examples I can think of include acid-base equations, cardiac disease, or pulmonary disease, and anticipating these problems ahead of time and considering bringing things such as figures or illustrations that can help students through it can make the discussion go easier and be very helpful. Lastly, I'm going to spend a minute or so giving you tips on how to troubleshoot some issues that might arise during the session. Most common challenge is stalling of the conversation. Sometimes it feels like no one wants to participate. The case could be challenging, or maybe the students are not engaged. It is important to remember that awkward silence is sometimes okay. It might make students feel uncomfortable, and hopefully someone will speak up. If they're still quiet, ask them, what are they thinking? Ask them to tell you about a similar challenging case that they might have experienced. If all fails, start calling on students by name or go in order. The conversation can also stall because of lack of knowledge or the students feeling intimidated to speak. If you sense that it is the latter, then do your very best to make them at ease. Sometimes I intentionally tell students the times I've made mistakes. I've noticed that my honest admission of making a mistake creates a safe environment for students to take a chance at trying. Another challenge is the group getting sidetracked from the objectives you want to address for the session. Your objective might be wanting to expand differential diagnosis for hypotension in the operating room, for example. But a student can take one of the causes of hypertension, say malignant hyperthermia, and spend a lot of time discussing the management strategies and so forth. As a facilitator, you should recognize when this happens and bring the discussion back to the topic, to the objectives you want to address. While management strategies of malignant hyperthermia would be good information and helpful for the students to know, you want to make sure that your objectives are addressed on that particular session. The important part of the discussion is enabling students to understand their own thought process, and if it's not clear from their response to a question, then follow-up questions and statements can help uncover what's going on. Some of my favorite phrases include, "Tell me more." "Why do you answer that way?" "Is there another way to think about this?" "Does anyone have another idea?" "What else could be going on?" The goal here is to get at the depth of knowledge and what goes into clinical decision making so that it can be corrected or supported, and so that it can be accessible in real clinical scenarios. So it is my hope that after watching these two sessions, you'll be able to define problem-based learning and discussion, and outline key goals for this learning format. In addition, I hope you have identified some strategies to guide a group of learners through a case, restarting stalled or sidetracked discussions, and encouraging further reflection after incorrect responses, and enabling whole group participation. Okay, it's time to take a moment and ask yourself, what will I add to my toolbox after learning about problem-based discussion strategies? Here's one way to apply your learning. Why don't you go ahead and create a problem-based learning of your own? With my group of educators, we're going to create a PBLD for rapid sequence induction in a septic patient. Maybe you can do that with some of your colleagues. And as you create it, some of the principles we discussed would become even more clear. This is the conclusion of the problem-based discussion modules. Thank you for your time.